At the end of that presentation, it'll be 20 to 30 minutes. We'll open up the floor to Q&A. I'll get it rolling. I'll try to keep it moving quickly, and we'll revisit that when we start the Q&A process. Try and get as many questions to them as possible. Before we get started, I want to recognize some elected officials in the room. Councilor Sally Russell, I saw you come in.
Hi, I'm here.
There she is. Here you go. Thank you for coming.
This is great, you're here.
Justin Livingston, City Councilor, who's here. Okay. And County Assessor Scott Langston.
Over here.
Scott, are you here? There you are. Thank you for coming. Did I miss any elected officials that are here with us? Great. And thanks to all of you for giving up part of your day. All right, so we're going to get this rolling, and I'm going to hand over the mics, and I'll be back at you when we're ready to have the Q&A. Thanks.
So can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, good. My name is Casey Rhodes, as previously mentioned. Thank you very much for being here. It's a real pleasure to serve as your mayor, to be with you. It's a wonderful facility in Washington City. We are going to get into the state of the city, where I'm going to make the case that the strength and the state of our city has never been stronger. In our presentation, we'll get that. We're going to start off with a short video that I think does a good job of encapsulating why we all love Ben, why we're here, and what really the Ben story of those is all about. So if we could start that video, that'd be great. So we chose that video because we really wanted to make sure that we remembered, before we get into the challenges we face, and there are many, that we still have it really, really, really good. And we oftentimes hear from a small number of people, or it depends on the size of the crowd we're in, people who are worked up about things. But I think this day and age, it's important to remember, as we learned recently in that primary election for the gubernatorial race, that people can make themselves seem bigger than they are with social media and all those kinds of things. Short guys have been doing it for years with pickups and their big tires with kids. And I'm 5'9" with a heel on, so I don't think that I just make the cut. The point being is that really we could spend all night talking about things that are challenging, things that are tough, and we will address those. But I think tonight, I wanted to make sure we set the tone correctly, that from my opinion, the state of our city has never been stronger, without question. All the objective measures would point to that. Our economy is strong, the unemployment is low, people can't seem to get enough of Bend, and some people would think that Bend is being loved to death, but there's things we can do to mitigate that. What gives me the greatest optimism about the future of our city and the strength of the city isn't the objective measures, because we can always measure those. I have seen our community come together in the last 4 or 5 years in ways that in my lifetime before that, I hadn't. And we're going to touch on that today as to some of the major accomplishments that have been achieved by the city of Bend, the staff and the community, and the projects we've been able to put into completion because of the collaborative nature of people setting aside differences and working together. The state of the city has never been stronger because of the accolades, the awards, and the recognition that we continue to get. The foundation of a great city has been laid, and we continue to work on that. That will be a theme. Bend continues to be a very safe place. to Bend. We're continuing to make improvements in public safety. The condition of our streets is significantly better than it was just a couple of years ago. And we have, as a city, have demonstrated we can manage complex and technical jobs on time and under budget. One of the things I wanted to point out was that usually Eric doesn't demand such a fee to get in the door. He must be a rock star for you guys all to pay to come see him. The last time I was a part of a group where people were paying to come see, I volunteered with the Swinging with the Stars for the Sparrows Club. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the Sparrows Club is a wonderful organization which raises money for families of children who have significant medical expenses. And we did a spoof on Dancing with the Stars where I dressed up at the Tower Theater as John Travolta in heels and a white blouse at the top with these really slim pants. And I was supposed to channel John Travolta, and instead I think I looked a little more like Las Vegas Elvis. So I am considerably more comfortable being with you here tonight. It's absolutely a pleasure. The other thing that I should make sure I do before we get into the meat of the presentation is I will preface this with you understanding my philosophy about what a city should be. I think a city should be a place that is dynamic. It changes and preferably grows in a controlled, thoughtful manner. And that really is the premise and the underpinning of the statewide land use system. And if you disagree with that premise because this is a destination resort, you've retired here, then that probably is where we have a discussion to be had. I'm sure we can do that later. So in today's, we have been doing a lot of things very, very well. This is the second year that the Millikan Institute has recognized Bend as the best #1 small performing city, both in 16 and 17. One of the things that we have to make sure we do is point out that Bend isn't just great because of the efforts the city has been on in the last couple of years, but Bend is great because we have a world-class healthcare system. We have a world-class community college. We're developing a world-class 4-year degree granting institution at Oregon State University. We have excellent parks, excellent local schools, and those are things that are driving people to Bend because they want the amenities that we have spent a lot of time and trouble investing in and developing ourselves as a community. If you want to go to the next one, one of the things that we're most excited about, certainly, and I think this points to the investments the city has made, the community in general, is that the old story, and it's still tough, and we need to continue to work on diversifying the economy, but the numbers point out that we are in fact diversifying the economy. This is year over year percentage change in the gross domestic product of Deschutes County, as I understand it. And financial activities, professional business services, durable goods manufacturing, education, and health services lead the way. And this is incredibly exciting for those of us that are concerned about a good local economy. You'll note, and I thought the thing that surprised me the most when we saw this slide at a city council meeting was that leisure and hospitality is actually flatlined. And David Runberg from the State Employment Department came and told us that it's his sense from studying this market, which he does for a living, that we may have reached market saturation when it comes to tourism. We all feel the effects of tourism, no doubt, and it's significant. But I think I take a bunch of heart in seeing these numbers because these numbers tell the story that we are changing. The poverty with a view, I hope, will be something that my kids and your kids and the people who work for you and work with you, that their kids isn't something that is a paradigm that is their reality. One of the things I think too that is important, companies like 5 Talent, Hydro Flask, the Bend Chamber, Shoes Brewery, Mount Bachelor, Navis, Edco, St. Charles, G5, Bend Research, they've all signed on to a statement indicating that Bend is a lifestyle city and that it's cultivating tomorrow's economy. And I don't think there's any question that as we continue to be the beacon of opportunity and hope for young people to come to our community and invest in themselves, we'll continue to make investments to make sure that we achieve that. So on to city accomplishments. One of the things as we were preparing this presentation, we, with the help of quite a few people working on it, wanted to tell the story about the development of Bend and what we've been able to accomplish, something akin to what you would see in building a house for yourself. We have spent a tremendous amount of time as a city working on the foundation and on some of the things that you can't necessarily see every day. Those are water mains, sewer mains, street improvements that you can see, but they're not the hot button issues that we oftentimes run across in city council meetings, but they're incredibly important. that is the underpinning for a good economy. It's the underpinning for us being able to have more employment lands, more residential lands, more housing availability, more institutional purposes like education and healthcare. Those are the important projects. And really the biggest of those was the completion of the surface water project. The water reclamation facility should be done this year or next. And most importantly, and I think this points to how the City of Bend has been able to manage your resources that you give the city to make investments. In the Southeast Interceptor, which was an incredibly expensive project, at least $60 million, $70 million, with all the segments put together. And what I would tell you is that that project came in on time and under budget. The city has adopted procurement methods that give us more flexibility to be able to manage big, technical, complex projects. And I think in preparing for this presentation, one of the things that was brought to my attention by people who've been in the community longer than I is that we truly have developed as a city to a considerably more sophisticated organization. And when you can put a sewer main in that starts in a residential area that averages 20 to 25 feet in depth and is 30 inches in diameter and works its way, that's number 5 on the east side of town there you're seeing, and you all probably remember when that thing popped onto 27th Street, went all the way through the commercial corridor, all the way around the hospital and beyond. I, as mayor of Bend, did not receive but at least, there was one complaint that I received as the mayor of Bend about an incredibly technical project that was detours and expense and noise and dust and all of those things. We truly have stepped up our game at the City of Bend, and the credit absolutely goes to the city manager and his staff for making sure that when we take your resources and we begin to deploy those around the city, we can do it in a way that hopefully builds the confidence the next time we come to you to make a big investment in the community. I hope you'll remember what we were able to do on this project.
This chart represents about $250 million over the last 10 years. So as the mayor said, it's those foundational elements, those things that you can't see, we're now finally caught up on water and sewer. There's more incremental improvements that need to be made with those utilities, but it's the roads, it's transportation. We're going to talk a lot more about that in the presentation. We accomplished some of that through the general obligation bond the voters approved in 2011 with Green Market and roundabout right over here at Empire and 18th. Simpson and Washington and Powers and Brookswood. But there's more to be done, and we'll talk more like that.
One of the things that I was absolutely the most proud moment to be on the city council was when the entire city council, all 7 of us, came together several meetings ago, and we outlined the need and recognized the need to make 2 major transportation corridor improvements inside of our city. The one down in the south is Murphy Road, where Murphy Road currently hits Browser House and is a T intersection with a stop sign. That road in the next 2 to 3 years will go over the railroad tracks and hit 15th. So for all of you who commute east, west, and Bend on any given day, which is half the city, you will have a way around the Reed Market Railroad when they pull across and stop, and back up, and pull ahead, and then take a cigarette break, and then back up again. At least there's going to be a way around that. My entire lifetime growing up here in Bend, that has never been the case. You had to go clear past the dump to get around it. And this is an example of the City of Bend recognizing that there are in fact congestion issues. We know it, we realize it, and we're making that improvement. I think even more of you might be concerned with the extension of 27th Street to Empire. So where 27th Street currently terminates at the north end at the light with Public Market, that will go through the old baseball field and across the canal and by the Pine Nursery Park, and it'll hit Empire. And now as a city, we will truly have a complete east side bypass. So when you'll be able to get off, 97 down Baker Road, go all the way around the city and work your way without having to take the circuitous route of Butler Market and Purcell and that whole thing. So to me, what this represents, not only in terms of congestion relief though, is in particular emergency response times. So many of you probably are familiar that there is a fire station on Country Club Drive in the southeast part of the city. They can't take Reed Market to go east because of concern of being stopped for a train. So they always take a different route, even if that happens to be the faster one. But of course, if they're responding to an emergency, that's not a chance they can take. It'll be very similar in the northeast part of the city. and freight. For those of you who are very concerned about freight in this in the business community, we're making the investments that help all modes of transportation and hopefully hit all parts of the economy. In addition to this, in the southeast part of the city, the timing is perfect because the school district is building a high school down at 15th and Knott. So that should be an incredible improvement, and also a good example, I think, of showing two local agencies that are working hard to work together to make sure the resources you gave in the school bond and the resources we have as a city to employ those resources are put to the highest and best use. And it's not always easy to do with a city that seems to be bursting at the seams. In 2017, the city issued 938 single-family home permits, which adds to the building total. The total worth of the buildings is $244 million, and the total tax assessed value is $445. We wanted to make sure, and I wanted to point out, we're hearing lots of chatter about how fast spend is growing, but it's important to have the historical context to know just how fast that is. And in 2007, to put it in comparison, in 2007, 2,500 single-family home permits were given out, and now we're at 1,000. So I would object and contest the contention that Bend is at a runaway growth pace. It is growing fast, and we are making investments. 2007 was without question runaway breakneck growth, and we all felt it, and a good number of us were a part of that. This, I think, feels considerably better in terms of our ability to manage, maintain, and keep up and grow in a thoughtful way. And I know that's incredibly important to so many people, that we grow in a thoughtful place, in a thoughtful manner, that makes a tremendous difference. This is an issue that's particularly near and dear to my heart. We had a woman come to our council meeting last summer, and she told us a harrowing story of having been downtown, and someone who was either mentally ill or chemically dependent put her in a situation where she felt threatened at a minimum, and actually perhaps chased into a store. And so the city council, we've been hearing reports that we need to step up our game in the downtown core in particular, at night in particular, and we will be investing significantly in safety improvements and public safety improvements in downtown. Those include the increased police presence, and we are now fully staffed as a police department. This will be the first year in a good number of years where we're going to have a full traffic patrol team for speeding and going out, and you take care of it. And we'll have 6 patrol officers for the first time in a very long time, which is a wonderful thing because those officers will be able not only to go to the residential areas that we hear so much about speeding, but they're going to be able to go downtown and be an increased presence. There's going to be enhanced private security. We're collaborating with the Downtown Bend Business Association for a new economic improvement district. We're installing security cameras both in the breezeway, the plaza, on top of the parking garage, and trying to put eyes and ears in places so that way our police officers have the ability to bring people to justice if they're caught breaking the law. We removed the attractive nuisances, which used to be in the form of garbage dumpster enclosures downtown, which some bad things were happening in and around them, so no, that is no longer a choice. Improvements to the Mirror Pond parking lot, parking restrictions along Drake Park, and I'm especially excited about these last two. And one is an initiative called Bend Cares. And the idea is that we're going to have a campaign where we're going to encourage folks to not just give money to folks on the street in the form of panhandling and cash, but instead give people an opportunity and education and resources to devote those resources to organizations that are going to deliver those services in a manner to help people who are chemically addicted and want or mentally ill and have a place to go. Beyond that, for the longest time, whenever our police force has had to take action with someone who was mentally ill or chemically dependent, 2 of our officers, when we were already short-staffed, used to have to take those folks to St. Charles emergency room, where 2 officers would have to stay with that person for sometimes 4 to 6 hours or longer, depending on what the issue is. We have a collaboration with Deschutes County where they're going to be building a respite center where our law enforcement professionals can take people who need those services and leave them in a new facility co-located with the jail in the north end of town. And our police officers will be able to go right back to work and not spend 4 to 6 or longer hours in an emergency room. And I think that is a good thing for not only our officers, but if we're all in an emergency room for something, I think we all feel a little bit better ourselves. In addition to this, I want to thank the voters for passing the fire levy. That fire levy passed by a margin of 76% just recently in that May primary election. That's a fantastic number. Our fire department is doing a fantastic job at providing the services. Their cardiac arrest survival rates have gone from 33% in 2012 to 71%. That goes to show, and there's a whole bunch of factors behind that. It's response times, it's really neat community action apps where you can download an app, and if you're in Costco and somebody's having a heart attack, and 911 knows, your app goes off, and if you know how to perform CPR, you can be of some help. Over the past 4 years, the fire department has improved response times by more than a minute on average, and if you are dying of a heart attack, that obviously makes quite a large difference.
So I'm going to chime in here a little and talk a little bit about growth. And so this is both, I think there's some headway that we've made, but also some challenges ahead. And this graph, or this slide represents kind of the approach of growing both out and up. And so the out is the expansion areas, which you see in tan. And the areas in blue are what we call opportunity sites, so really seeing opportunities for redevelopment or infill. And so council went through a pretty extensive feasibility study where we said, we have this plan, this 20-year plan that was developed over 2 years with all sectors of the community. And I want to mention, kind of to reiterate what the mayor was saying, what I think we've learned over the really past 20 years that instead of just getting in our camps when we talk about infrastructure, land use planning, we've got environmental interests or business interests, and then those two just colliding, we said, we're bringing everybody to the table. We're going to do this collaboratively. So when we're planning large infrastructure like sewer plans or how we're going to grow over the next 20 years, we do that with a pretty extensive process. Over 60 people involved in this plan that was approved unanimously by council and adopted by the state a little over a year ago, and now we're implementing that plan. And so where do we begin? We can't attack all those growth areas at once. They all require infrastructure. They require coordination in terms of how we're going to finance that with the property owners. So what we did is a study to say what's the best return on investment? Where do we yield the biggest bang for the buck, the most affordable housing, the most job opportunities? And the areas that came out on top are Southeast Bend, what we call the elbow, that area in tan there, as well as the core, and that's the area along 3rd Street, and what we call the Cormine site, and land in and around Crux. So that's the first start, but by no means is that it. There's a plan over the next really 10 years to complete infrastructure and land use planning for all of these areas. But it's going to require a lot of coordination between public and private sector. Some of these areas, they're large enough, they have land ownership that are coming in without city involvement, but there's still infrastructure requirements that we're coordinating. So again, we're doing this work together. We're also implementing this vision called complete neighborhoods. This is an example where we are right now of finding a way to put amenities throughout the city. A bad city plan is when you have all of your jobs in one area, all of your housing in another. There's a lot of strain on your infrastructure. But if you can put amenities, parks and schools and restaurants and things that are in your neighborhood, it's a much better way to manage getting people around, reducing congestion, and just also building a sense of community. We want to do that through really building a complete neighborhood concept, and that's what this plan is implementing.
So one of the things that I know the neighborhoods in particular are really excited about is the empowerment of neighborhoods, the Neighborhood Leadership Alliance. This was originally, there was a predecessor to this, and the organization was a loose coalition of the neighborhood chairs. And the neighborhoods organically rose up and said that they wanted a seat at the table. And so there was a discussion about what that would look like, what they would do, and what we would do with them. Originally it was proposed to be a livability committee. And some of us on council pushed back against that notion. And the reason we pushed back against that notion was because a majority of us didn't feel as though neighborhoods themselves, or any one group for that matter, should necessarily have the mantle of livability. Because livability isn't just a nice, quiet, safe street, which we should have those. Livability is having a job. Livability is having a place for kids to go to school. Livability is a big, big context. It's a big, big picture. And we didn't want any one group to necessarily bring that as if though that was all things livability came from one perspective. But I'm particularly excited about giving neighborhoods the opportunity as we grow, because they need it, and we all need it for the neighborhoods we live in, to have a voice and a seat at the table. So City Council will be tasking the Neighborhood Leadership Alliance with work we would like them to do, with recommendations they'd like to bring back to us when we have hot button issues. And written into their charter, it's important to note, we are interested in all issues around the city, but we're particularly interested in having this entire Neighborhood Leadership Alliance, representing 13 neighborhood associations, to bring us issues of truly citywide concern. Not issues about one little pocket of town or even just one side of town, whichever side that might happen to be, but instead, our city resources need to go to managing the issues as best we can on a global scale, on a citywide scale, and our policy should reflect that.
Yeah, I think affordable housing is top of mind. It's one of our council goals, and it's something that we're putting a lot of energy into right now. And it's something that has been on our radar for many years, and it's something that it's connected to the other things that we're working on. And we're talking about infrastructure investments. In order to have land available so that housing prices remain affordable, we need to supply that land with infrastructure. But just giving you a sense of some of the accomplishments. Really, back in 2006, when Ben was the first city in the state to impose an affordable housing fee, it came with some controversy. It's a third of 1% that goes into a fund that generates about 100 units per year. So since its inception in 2006, it's helped produce over 700 units in total. But more importantly, leverages state and federal dollars to get actual projects built. Much like the one that you see in that photo, that's a Housing Works Eastlake project on the east side of town. In addition to that, we're also removing regulatory barriers like removing financing hurdles, system development charges, those are impact fees. We're allowing those to be deferred for multifamily projects. We're allowing affordable housing that's deemed restricted to be exempt from paying affordable housing. We're also changing our code. We're trying to introduce different housing model types, so cottage housing, so that's a smaller home footprint, allowing for the development code to be more flexible for that to occur. Making accessory dwelling units more permissible. So they used to be a conditional use. Now they're allowed outright. They've become a pretty popular form of development in all of our neighborhoods that providing additional housing. And we've got some exciting things coming on the horizon, including taking advantage of a state program to add 50 acres to our expanded urban growth boundary to leverage, again, affordable housing by saying, well, we're going to add more housing to our inventory, but we want to see it restricted. We want to see that housing remain affordable for a long period of time. And so we're applying in partnership with Redmond over the summer. So a lot of work taking place here. I think I've covered most of it.
Before we move on, I would just add, housing, without question, is probably one of the nearest and dearest to the city councilors' hearts issues that we have to face. And I know when I've toured Bethlehem in particular, the issue isn't always getting people in there, which that's always tough because there's such a big need. They do a wonderful job. But it's where do those folks go when they have saved up money for a down and they don't have the best credit and rental history? Where do those folks go? Where do the people who work for us? A good portion of the people who work for the city of Bend and the utility department in particular, very similar to my small company, which is the exact same business. A good number of the people who are tasked with providing you 24 hours, 7 days a week, 365 days a year service and respond to emergencies live well more than 30 minutes from Bend because they simply can't afford it. And that's a problem. And we shouldn't let that continue to be the case. We will continue to work very diligently through our housing strategy session this summer and fall to continue to address this issue in every way that we possibly can as a city.
Okay, so now we've talked about accomplishments, some of the accolades that the mayor mentioned. I want to talk about kind of setting the stage for the future, and of course, growth. And I look at this, and probably like you, I get a little bit, wow, 250, does that line say 250,000 by 2065? No way, that seems like a lot. Just to pace ourselves, the projection for 2040 is about 153,000 and then by the year 2030, probably about 120,000 people in Bend. We're getting close to that century mark. So it's happening, right? And so these are numbers that we are saying, well, how does the city get to be 250,000? That's not what we do. this is how do we plan for and really achieve those smart growth goals that the mayor mentioned. And that's all done through land use plan and a comprehensive plan that we just completed. That covers us to about 2030 or so. We'll continue to expand and continue to look for opportunities to accommodate those folks in a smart way, in an efficient way, so that we are putting infrastructure, making smart infrastructure investments. Because most of that infrastructure, it doesn't come, the money to pay for that infrastructure doesn't come from the state or federal government. It comes on our backs. And so if we are going to be paying those additional fees, additional rates, we want to make sure we do that in a smart way that yields the kind of community that we want, that doesn't lose that bad feel. So for me, good growth is about listening to all four corners of the community. And I define those four corners really simply as the folks that are concerned around the natural environment, preserving our natural environment. It's those folks that are concerned around our business climate and making sure that we've got a sustainable economy. It's ensuring that we've got access to a wide range of housing so that Bend is accessible to all. We don't become an exclusive community. And it's also about making sure that Bend remains kind of, we have what I call heritage, this sense of place, that there's a lot of history in Bend, and we don't want to lose that small town feel. And some of the work that the mayor talked about with the Neighborhood Leadership Alliance is an attempt to take hold of that, to grow together with our residents, our businesses, and we do that in a way that preserves that quality of life. So, we're looking for good growth. And as we mentioned, a lot of investments made in our utilities, and we turn our focus over to transportation. And I just want to mention that I think back in the early 2000s, there was that roadway growth. And I don't think the city was prepared for that, the amount of growth that we were seeing. There was a lot of both political and administrative instability during that time. Since that time, we have now 20-year land use plans. We have 20-year infrastructure plans for water and sewer. We have a plan for transportation. We're updating that right now. And those plans also then produce 5-year capital improvement plans. And those capital improvement plans have financing plans. In some cases, we have 20-year financial models. So we're not going through these major spikes. We're smoothing out rate increases, ensuring that we can pay for the infrastructure needed to support that growth. So again, there's more science behind that growth. One example is street maintenance. This has been a big focus over the last couple of years, and we are making headway, as the mayor mentioned in his opening remarks. We have about over 800 lane miles in the entire city system. We are on track to obtain about 100 lane miles per year, given some funding, both some one-time funding that council allocated in this 2-year budget. We're about halfway through our 2-year budget. The state stepped up with a 10-cent gas tax increase in 2017 that's phased in over time. So those one-time funds will be supplemented with ongoing revenue from the state over the next couple of years. So we should be able to maintain the funding to keep us on track. Our PCI, it stands for Pavement Condition Index, the condition of the roads. We were low point at a 68 back in 2015. We're now on track to be about 73. This is system-wide. So the collectors and arterials are in the high 70s to close to 80 for those higher order streets, the busier streets. The residential is where we've got a lot of work to do. We want to be up in that 80 range. So we're a good number of years from getting there, but we're on our way. So let's now kind of put the whole story with transportation together. So I want to kind of walk through, and then we'll dive into some data. So this is where it gets a little more technical. So first off, as I mentioned, declining state and federal revenue. So we can't look to the state or federal government to solve our transportation problems. There's talk of an infrastructure package at the federal level. We just haven't seen much. The transportation package that got passed with the state is really just helping with our maintenance issue. It didn't really help the capital side, so there's new roads that need to be built to deal with that road. We do have a tool that's in the form of what are called SDC, System Development Charges, or impact fees. Those impact fees get collected at the time the development occurs. So to build a single-family home in Bend, you're paying about $22,000 in impact fees. That's for transportation, water, sewer, parks. But those lag. You get the development comes, you collect the money, and it collects over time. So it's a challenging funding source. It's also volatile. It's based on development activity. The $59 million in deferred maintenance. So as I mentioned, we are making improvements in paving roads, and so there's roads that if we keep the good roads good, that's a lower cost way to keep those good roads good. But roads there's a certain amount of roads that below like about 50 PCI, that they need to be rebuilt. We can't rely on maintenance. That's throwing away money. And there's about $60 million worth of projects for roads these are our old roads that are built and their standard isn't correct for the traffic that we get, they need to be rebuilt. In addition to that, as we now have these 20-year plans that look at the infrastructure needs for that growth, back in 2011, when was the last time that we updated our transportation system plan, this number was $213 million of needed capital. This number will go up as we're updating our transportation system plan, and as we assess what the community wants to, what kind of infrastructure we want for that road. So, with that, I'm thinking that if you can help me click through this again. So let me talk about the revenue coming in, just to kind of paint the picture and complete the story. So first off, pretty static state funding. So this is that 10-cent gas tax that we get our proportionate share. Layered onto that is the city contributes part of its general fund. So our general fund is the property taxes, mainly the property taxes you pay, as well as the taxes that tourists pay when they stay here in Bend. That makes up more than 90% of the revenue coming in. That money is then used to provide police, fire, and street maintenance services. We've been able to prioritize street maintenance, but it comes at the cost of balancing that with police and fire public safety needs. So you can see that that history. So we've increased that over the last 10 years. Then layered onto that in blue are our system development charges. You can see some of the volatility in collecting those. And then if you add in, we've leveraged our revenue to finance projects, transportation projects, go out and issue debt. And then in 2011, voters approved the general obligation bond. It was a $30 million general obligation bond. And council was very intentional during the recession to not increase taxes. We had an old levy expiring, and we said, what could we afford to keep that rate constant? And that was $30 million. Then after $30 million, what can we build for $30 million? So widening out Reed Market, going up and over the railroad, that would have been more than $30 million. So how do we live within that constrained budget? So it's, again, not this magic bag of money that's sitting out there. Gee, if we just use that magic bag of money, using the resources that we have. And so that money goes winding down. So that general obligation bond, we're finishing up our last project, and that's 14th Street right now. So let's talk about where we're spending the money. So as we're collecting those system development charges, we've built up our piggy bank over the last couple of years. But we have some obligations to fund. So we have transit. So that comes out of the city's general fund. That's 1% of our general fund is transit. That's pretty constant. That's projecting out over the next 5 years. The state transportation package that was passed last summer did allocate an almost tripling of transit. So that does not show there. That will go to the counties. The counties will distribute that money for the transit system. City contracts out that service. But the city's general fund is remaining constant. Street maintenance and operations. So this is snow plowing, paving streets, all of that to maintain our system is, again, pretty constant. We've bolstered that, but it's fairly flat given our revenue assumptions, or in terms of our ability to raise the service level. Added on to that is other transportation infrastructure. So this is, what we're trying to do is leverage the money that we're receiving. So as we get system development charges, holding some of that back to say, how can we help if the private sector is required to improve an intersection, but they don't trip up and they don't make that intersection fail, and they're not going to complete the entire thing. If there's a gap, using some of those funds to help get that completed. So again, public-private partnership. Then as we talked about with our plan to focus on Murphy and Empire roads, we are doubling down. So we're using the system development charges that we've accumulated. And of our about $65 million that we've projected we can spend in capital over the next 5 years, 50 of that $65 million are going to those two projects, Murphy and Empire. So great deal of work ahead of us. And then layered on top of that are the 14th Street reconstruction that we're finishing out. That's in 2019, and bike, ped, and ADA. So this is about $800,000 over the next. So I mentioned, remember, $65 million over the next 5 years being spent. $800,000 is going towards what we call bike greenways to help improve connectivity in those low-stress streets. About a little over $2 million for safety projects. So this is crosswalks or intersection improvements where we have high crashes, and then some ADA accessibility improvements that make up that balance. So you can see that layered on top of that darker gray. So that gives you a sense of where the dollars are going. and then the total amounts. So there's a lot more need than this, though. So we can't say, oh, if we just get in Empire and Murphy and some safety projects, we can call it good. We're growing fast. We need a more sustainable revenue source. And that leads us into the kind of closing comments from the mayor about the transportation plan. And what we're hoping to do, and we have a poster board there, and we're in the process of seeking input, and we hope that you can take us up on it and help us build a transportation plan for the future.
So Katie knew it was an election year because she told me that 3 minutes ago we only had 2 minutes left. So I will go as quick as I can so we can do question and answers. But the transportation plan is very important. And we put together a 25-member citizen committee for people all around the city, from all different walks of life, from all different sectors of the economy. People new to town, people that have been here for some time. And the idea is we want to be able to build a transportation system plan that you all can buy into. And beyond that, I would like to be able to bring an ask to you as voters in the next 18 months, asking what projects you want to see funded. And I always tell people, and sometimes to their chagrin, I will build anything you're willing to pay for. But I can't build it if we don't have the funds. And beyond the projects Eric outlined and mentioned, we don't have the funding source, we don't have the revenue stream as a local city to continue to make these big investments. And so that is a significant part of the discussion moving forward. And then really, as we transition into this last slide, what's next for Bend? And we all know Bend is going to continue to grow. There's no question about that. The only time I've ever seen in my lifetime Bend slow down is when we had a tremendous recession, of which none of us liked, and was a very bad thing for families and individuals, people's careers, investments, and otherwise. My ask to the community is that let's not relitigate the fights of the past in the years to come. We have been down that road of trying to stop growth. We've been down that road of trying to contain growth. We can only manage growth thoughtfully and intelligently and try and direct it in as best a way that we possibly can. And it's my hope that as a community, we take the investment and the energy that we have and the shared purpose and the collaboration that we've been able to achieve, both through the sewer infrastructure advisory group work, where we invested almost $100 million in sewer all around the city. We did the same thing with reaching a compromise on how to build the city out, the urban road boundary expansion process. We have a track record in the history recently of coming together as a community to make this city better. And I know that's going to be tough, and I'll leave you with an anecdote that came from my two girls as to wrap up kind of their thoughts on growth as young children who are going to inherit Bend one day. And the house is off of Brookswood Boulevard there, and we sold a strip of ground off of it, and the neighbors subdivided their piece. And so the girls were going to lose what was kind of this open space. You know how it is when somebody lives in a house next to open space, they think it's their open space. I'm as we're as guilty as anyone. And so Makai, who's 10, I asked her, well, you know, babe, what do you think about the changes that are coming? And she lamented the loss of the open space and the trees, and she's a very private person and was kind of going to miss out on that. And I said, well, I understand, and that's completely reasonable. And then I asked Ellie, who's now 8, what do you think? And she looked at me and she says, I want to meet new people and new dogs. So I think, Anne had a neighbor that likes us. She actually said that. Because the only people behind us, they weren't too happy when we took up their open space. Everybody just does it to each other. But the point being, let's be a little more like Ellie, right? It's growing up here in Bend, change is really all I've ever known. And for anyone who moved to Bend within the last 10 or 15 years, you probably wouldn't have moved to Bend if it was a town I grew up in. So I know that most of you in this crowd probably feel something similar to that, but that's not a sentiment I'm going to ever shove down anybody's throats. But let's just face the reality that a growing, diverse, and attractive community such as ours is not likely to change anytime soon. So with that, we're over time, but
Okay. Thank you very much. So I'm going to kick this off, and while you guys are all contemplating your questions, I would like you to answer. You were, well, you're city council and you're city manager 5 years from now. And if you think about the presentation you just made, what will be the best accomplishments between now and 5 years from now?
I think if I had to look ahead and see Bend 5 years from now,
without question, if we could see increased housing availability in a broader mixture of housing types available for people who are living in Bend and going to school, the people who work with me and for me, people who work at St. Charles, the people who work at our education institutions, that would be a wonderful thing if we didn't have to constantly hear about young people working for us living 5 and 6 young adults to a house to make a go of it. I don't think that's a good thing. I would love to see in 5 years' time, I'd love to bring that slide back and show the diversification of the economy, and I would really, really like to see continued diversification of the economy. And then really, in 5 years' time, we really need a new and diversified funding stream and strategy for how we're going to take care of transportation. Because people sometimes are surprised to know that with our water and our sewer fund, we have, the rates you all pay in your bills, and there's things we can do with that revenue to continue to invest in those systems, modernize them, and keep them robust and good systems in working order and meet the future demand. We do not have that with transportation. The only thing we have, as Eric said, that is a significant source is STCs, and it is volatile at best at times, and we'll continue to leverage that. But really, as a community, the choice for all of us is how are we going to fund transportation improvements?
All right, opening it up. Yep, first hand up to the back. Hi, come up here.
I was wondering if Ben Parks, I was wondering if Ben Parks and Rec is part of your planning process leading up to today, basically. And if so, what are the
Yes, so the Ben Parks and Rec is an integral part of our comprehensive plan.
Eric, would you mind repeating the
So
question?
the question was, is Parks and Rec a part of our planning process? And yes, it goes both ways. So we have a comprehensive plan that we showed you at the expansion, going up and out. We account for parks as part of that plan. We work really closely with them. They are just wrapping up their comprehensive plan, which their plan includes not just parks, but trails and other things. And we coordinate, we just are commenting on their plan right now, so we work really closely together.
Next question.
I've been to Bend since 1985, and a few days ago, Reed Market going west was closed from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. for simple pavement. And I didn't want to head towards 14, Wayne Simpson, so I ended up hitting the Parkway and going Newport, which is bumper to bumper. And my question is, why can't the paving be done at 8 p.m. to 4 a.m.? I believe the Bend is too large now to do paving during the day.
That's a great question. I got a text from my wife stuck in that traffic. It's the same thing. And I was like, oh, yeah, it was bad. So the answer to that question, we do a lot of night work. That type of treatment on Reed Market is called a slurry seal. And this kind of to keep the good roads good. It has to be done applied during the day because in a type of treatment, it needs the sun to cool. We don't typically do that type of treatment for our collectors. This is something that is new. We learned a lot. We changed when we saw that traffic jam up. When we came back and finished that work, we flagged differently to different detours. So we do make course corrections like anybody when there was the added complication of having a concert that night too that added to the traffic. So
The others? This one in the back, and then I'm going to go to this one in the front.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Karen, and I'm a proponent of growth and managed growth, so kudos to both of you for looking at it as managed growth. One of the questions I have is about the 27th Street Empire connector, and just the fact that right now, I think that's a great idea. There's going to be a huge impact on 27th. 27th is already quite congested, bumper traffic. What other plans will make that burner? But are there any timelines of you addressing that situation?
I can address that. So before we're in a phase right now of that Empire extension of the traffic study, because it's not just impacts to 27th, but it's also impacts to the Parkway. If anybody knows, trying to get on the Parkway from Empire is a challenge. We're in design in partnership with ODOT to do some ramp improvements, some widening to improve capacity there, as well as where Highway 20 comes in. There's that congested signal there. So we see it as a whole corridor approach, and there's opportunities to look at additional intersection improvements like 27th and Commerce and others down 27. So when we put in extensions, we model the whole system. And what we're doing right now with the transportation system and some of the comments that we're getting, we are modeling our system at a pretty high level. So Green Market, Empire, the Parkway, how do we build, do we widen lanes? Do we look at completing some missing connections? How can we manage those higher order streets so that it's like a balloon, right? And you push it over here, it just pops out on the other side. So we're conscious of that, of not solving one problem only to create one.
And what I would add to that, just a little context for decision making and how we came to that. When the City Council was first presented with the choices of what to do with the money that had been saved up for system development charges, the council initially, on a kind of a 4-3 basis, settled on some corridor improvements inside of the city. And that was taking existing roads like Wilson, 8th, 14th, and another one, and making improvements. And it would have been making the base a lot better, new asphalt. It would have been making sure there was bike lanes where if there weren't sidewalks as well. But we worked out a compromise that involved some other things and got the full council to support and spend what I think system development charges should really develop a system and add true capacity where capacity did not exist before. And it also took the council being willing to raise road, water, and sewer franchise fees from 3% to 4%. So for those of you who agree with the idea that we should be making these significant improvements to help with congestion, they also will have bike lanes, they'll also have sidewalks, they'll be multimodal corridors. If you agree with that, please send your city councilors an email. You can send it to council@mendorca.gov. You can find it on the website. Please thank them for that support and tell them that you appreciate it. And because we're going to be taking our final vote on that next week, and it's important we stay the course because I wanted to be able desperately to show the voters that when we did have resources available, we were putting it to the best and highest use, the biggest impact. And my concern with making those improvements on those local streets, or even if they are collectors inside the city, is we weren't really getting any more congestion relief than we had before. This really helps with that. I think we'll pick up those streets in a potential bond, but that's what we need to hear from you during that process. Are those the kind of improvements you value? Are those the kind of improvements you would be willing to pay more for?
We have a question right here in front. Hi there, I am representing child care in Bend. Those of you that don't have young children might not know that there's a 1-year or longer wait list for children to get into child care in Bend. And so in a city where both parents have to work, where we're trying to create this complete neighborhood concept, and where we see this projected growth for the next however long we can imagine, what do you feel is the city's responsibility to help meet that distinct need?
Yeah, I think that's a really, I'm glad you raised that. I think that from an economic development standpoint, we're not going to be able to attract folks, especially that spousal kind of issue. It'd be one thing, if both spouses are working, and childcare is a key decision about moving here and creating kind of jobs. I think we have an economic development advisory board, and I know they've talked about this issue, so I encourage you to kind of work with them and see if there's some policy work, some opportunities for, as we're planning infrastructure or land needs, that we identify what barriers might exist from a land use planning perspective, perhaps.
I would just add, so, in our small company, we have some people who have young children that need that health, child care as well. And I swear they get every single bug, no demand. And it goes all to the curb. It's a real impact in terms of staffing and our scheduling and when we're evaluating projects. It should not be an impediment for a young person making their way to have their kids have needs, and we need to meet that need. I think your issue around having space and availability for these buildings and these institutions hits on what we all need, regardless of what sector we happen to be in. And we just flat need more of everything. More industrial, more light industrial, more commercial, more residential of all different kinds. And the best way we do that is push hard on finishing and following through on our urban growth boundary implementation and making sure that those annexation areas in particular, as well as the specified infill redevelopment areas, get the attention and the investment they need, and that's what we're going to be talking about as a council. How do we continue to prioritize those investments so we just have more land available for those needs?
Next.
Hi, I'm Jenna Conrad. I was just curious, some of these issues that Ben is dealing with that are new to Bend might not necessarily be new issues. So I'm wondering if you're looking at any other cities or towns that have gone through this kind of growth as examples of what to do or what not to do.
Yes, we do. We have a pretty extensive list of comparable cities, about I think over 30 that we use during our, when we develop our budget, and we have performance measures in the city. We compare ourselves, and we compare ourselves to fast-growing cities. So we use Flagstaff and Bozeman and St. George, Utah, many others that are in that Intermountain West that have that kind of higher climate that gets snow, right? We don't want to compare ourselves to a suburban community that might just be part of a metro area that's, you know, growing at 1 or 2% a year. And so we benchmark ourselves in terms of how we're providing utility services, public safety services, all the things that the city does. But more recently, what we're trying to do is be part of what's called a Smart Cities Initiative. There's a leading number of cities that are using technology to solve some of their infrastructure problems. So it's the idea of putting sensors in the road so you can have on-demand where you know where parking is available. Doing much better data collection in terms of how we're managing traffic and giving people choices. So there's a movement afoot, and we're trying to ensure that our organization is structured to help us solve those problems. We've got some really talented people that were over the summer kind of looking at an initiative to kind of keep rising to that next level. Technology is a great way to solve some of our problems.
I make it down to Phoenix, Arizona about once a winter for a little bit of time to visit family. And sometimes when you go down there, it kind of helps set your scale for what you're experiencing. You fly out of Redmond and you realize we're just a little dot, right? We're just a dot on the map. And you go to a big metropolitan area like Phoenix that's growing so fast, and we're wringing our hands about 2,000 acres over the next 20 years of renting. And I swear it'll push out that much ground in Phoenix the next corner, right? And that's not necessarily a good thing because it's sprawled and it's, you know, it's not great and it's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. But when I ask wait staff, when I eat at restaurants, you know, what brought you to this area and what was it like to find housing? In a big market that is providing those things, consistently, they have an easier time finding it down there than the people who live here, period. I mean, I do that all the time. I use people at the focus group. If I, you know, get a little bunch of you cornered tonight, I'm using you as a focus group. It truly makes a difference when you are meeting the demand. So that tells me we have a lot of work to do here in Bend, and we need to start making those investments in streets, water, and sewer in these areas that need it, both inside the city where it's designated as well as out.
Hi, Pete Capstrop. Thank you both tonight for being here with us. I have one question. It's related to the two things we talked a lot about today. It's affordable housing and SEC charges. And specifically, Eric, you talked about how you're weighing in right now on the Park District's comprehensive plan moving forward with. It's my understanding in the last week, they've just voted to increase SECs for the Park Service by 8%, which means the new single-family home is paying more than $7,900 of SECs when they're already above their current service levels. So do you guys coordinate with that or comment on those things?
Yeah, there was a joint meeting that the city council had with the Parks Board maybe about a month ago, and I think that a couple of councilors brought that up to say, can we afford the service that's being provided with parks? Because that comes in the form of fees and et cetera that you add to the cost of housing. And we have advocated for, and there is language in their comprehensive plan for, as the plan, from the plan that follows the capital improvement list, then follows the financing. We want to see options for affordable housing. So much like what the city has been doing of exempting for affordable housing, we'd like to see the Parks District kind of look at their methodology. They've been agreeable to that. So it will take some time, but that message has been sent from the council. Please maybe elaborate.
When you asked if we work with them, some of the councils like to browbeat them, and I don't know if that's working with anyone or not. It hasn't done us any good. It hasn't done us any good so far. So I'm gonna come with honey next time rather than a stick. There's one project in particular on the west side of the city that I'm going to be talking with park board members around trying to get some relief because it seems to be holding things up. So it probably would be a good thing for those of you who share Ken's sentiments to reach out to the members of your park board.
Thank you. We're over on this side of the room. Question.
Hi, my name is Rachel, and I'm a relatively new resident to Bend. I just wanted to comment that my family and I have found it incredibly welcoming and incredibly lovely to be here. So whatever you all are doing to encourage that amongst your residents, it's working. It's really been an easy move from the Seattle area. I want to go back to the Northeast Bypass project. That's where we live. And our backyard looks out at my nursery park, which seems to be that will be impacted by that bypass. And I'm curious how the road, the connector, will interact with the park. We access it, a lot of people access it. It's a really busy space, and I have a little bit of anxiety, and I challenge my inner Ellie to be welcoming in that conversation. But a road through a beautifully open space gives me pause. So I wanted to.
So I will hopefully put things at ease. We've been planning for this project for 20 years, and we put right of way, so we're not going through the park. If you go up above, you can see where the road is going to go, and it's in an area that's not used by the park. It's an open space. And what's that? Yes, it's the frisbee golf.
Okay.
So we can have staff get in touch with you and give you more plans and tell you how to get involved. So we have communication staff, so we'd be happy to do outreach so that you stay involved.
Okay, I think we have time for one, maybe two more questions if it goes fast.
Good evening. I've been a resident all of about 4 days, I think. After 10,000 miles of traveling in an RV in 25 states, would say this is home. So I'm glad to be here. Comment on the daycare thing. Having been properly only daycare, it's a lot of work for daycare owners to take their kids that want to hold them. So I don't think the city's really going to be able to help a whole lot on that until they convince the daycare owners to actually take the kids before they're 2. And then a question. Glad to see that you guys are thinking long term. When you said 2065 and 250,000 people, oh, really? That really shocked me, but I'm glad you're thinking that far ahead. But at the same time, one of the issues that you get when you get to larger cities is some sort of subway system. So have you thought that far ahead as far as a train or subway or something like that? Because now, I mean, in one sense, it seems to Chris asked the question now, it's going to be a lot easier to figure out zoning and now versus 50 years ago.
So I can say a subway system at Bend probably not going to work. Part of this is our geology. We've got like some hard rock that it would be really expensive. It's hard enough to put sewer in there, let alone an underground system. But I think in Bend, as we grow, we're looking at new and innovative ways to provide transit, not just a fixed route system, which we have now. The service level just isn't quite there to get some of those choice riders. We've got folks that are dependent upon transit. But we're going to be experimenting in partnership with Oregon State University Cascades to look at microtransit, look at ride sharing. So we already have Uber and Lyft in Bend. How do we use them? So kind of different models. There's a group in Bend called Move. Move Bend is part of it 2030 that's also looking at some of those things. So happy if you're interested in transportation options. We've got a seat at the table for you.
I think there was one more hand up over here. This will be the last question.
Hi, my name is Susan Rotella, and I'm the Executive Director of the Council on Aging. So I'm here representing seniors. And to piggyback on your issue, today the Senior Center had a conversation around age-friendly communities. And the largest, or the #1 issue that seniors brought up was the issue of transportation. Not more roads, not better maintained roads, not sidewalks or bike paths, but how do I get from point to point? And when 19% currently of our seniors or our citizens are 65 and older, I'm wondering what kind of investment are we making to help those seniors get around town and out of their cars?
Yeah, and I just brushed over it in the presentation, but just to reiterate, the state passed a transportation package, which it involves a payroll tax. It's 1% payroll tax, and everybody's paying in the state. That's going to triple the funding for transit. So you're going to see a lot of improvements for transit now that there's a dedicated funding source through that payroll tax. And they're Central Oregon Intergovernmental Council, it's a mouthful, they provide that transit service. they're going through a community planning effort, much like we're doing a big transportation plan. There's a planning effort to say, what does transit look like in Bend? How do we design a system for the future and make everybody's needs? So I would encourage the council to get involved in that planning effort because now is a great time to help shape it.
So it's COIC.
It's COIC. Not the city. We provide some funding, but we don't operate that system.
COIC has a board, and they're very approachable. They run the City Transit program. And I know I'm on the board, and we talk a lot about services, and they'll be helpful to you. I can connect you after this. So, Mayor Rhodes, City Manager King, thank you very much for your time tonight.
I was remiss in pointing out our staff because it's a whole team of folks, and a lot of them are here tonight. And I know that they would love to engage and talk with you. This is a great forum, so I'm just going to point them out and have them raise their hand if you have more specific questions on issues. So I'm just going to pan this way. So Ben Hempson's our business advocate. I saw Carolyn Egan, our economic development director. Ryan Oster, our city engineer. We mentioned Councilor Sally Russell, Councilor Justin Livingston. Our city capital projects director, Tom Hickman, David Abbas, the streets and operations director, Karen Swirsky from growth management, long range planning, and then Colin Stevens on the current planning. And then Paul Kansky, our police captain.
Just a reminder, if you have a few minutes, please go over and talk to those folks over there. Make sure you weigh in on the transportation plan. Great to have your input. Thank you very much for coming tonight. One last reach out to Combined Communications, Mid-Oregon Credit Union, providing auxiliary parking. And you try to say that with race. And also Central Oregon Daily. They provided some great coverage leading up to the event. And it's wonderful to have video coverage as well. Thank you very much. Enjoy the fabulous evening.